The champagne glass trembled in my hand as Marcus Henderson's words cut through the elegant chatter of Chicago's most exclusive business gala. Sarah, let's be honest here. You're simply not executive material. Some people are born to lead, others to follow. His condescending smile made my stomach turn. But what he didn't know was that in exactly 72 hours, I would own the company he thought he was destined to run. The Palmer House ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the city's business elite, their designer gowns and tailored suits creating a sea of ambition and old money. The October wind rattled the historic windows as Chicago's skyline twinkled beyond. But inside, the air felt suffocating with pretense and barely concealed corporate warfare. Before we continue with this incredible story of corporate revenge and hidden power, please subscribe to our channel to help us bring you more real stories like this one. Also, comment below and let us know where you're watching from. We love connecting with viewers from around the world who appreciate authentic tales of triumph over adversity. My name is Sarah Chun, and 6 months ago, I was just another mid-level marketing manager at Henderson Luxury Brands, a boutique firm specializing in high-end consumer goods. What nobody knew, not even Marcus Henderson, who had inherited the CEO position from his father, was that my family's investment fund had been quietly acquiring shares in the company for the past 3 years. My grandmother, Helen Chun, had built her fortune in real estate and manufacturing after immigrating from Taiwan in the 1960s with nothing but determination and an unshakable belief in the American dream. Helen had started with a single apartment building in Chinatown, scrubbing floors and painting walls herself to save money on contractors. She understood that success in America required not just hard work, but strategic thinking and the ability to see opportunities that others overlooked. By the 1980s, she owned 17 properties across Chicago's South Side, and by the 90s, she had diversified into manufacturing partnerships with companies that needed reliable, quality-focused production facilities. Sarah, she had told me during one of our weekly dim sum lunches in Chinatown, in business, the loudest voice in the room is rarely the smartest one. Watch, listen, and learn before you make your move. The most successful predators hunt in silence. Her weathered hands, still bearing calluses from her early days as a seamstress, gestured toward the bustling restaurant around us. Every person here has a story of perseverance. Your story will be different, but the principles remain the same. Marcus had always treated me like an inconvenience, despite my MBA from Northwestern Kellogg School of Management and my track record of increasing brand awareness by 40% in 2 years. My campaigns had revolutionized how Henderson Luxury Brands connected with younger demographics, introducing social media strategies that previous leadership had dismissed as beneath our brand standards. I had single-handedly negotiated partnerships with influencers who commanded audiences larger than traditional advertising could ever reach. Yet Marcus consistently minimized my contributions in executive meetings. Sarah, fetch me coffee, he'd say during board meetings where I presented comprehensive market analyses backed by months of consumer research. Sarah, this presentation lacks the executive vision we need. His dismissive attitude wasn't just about gender or ethnicity, though both played their part in a corporate culture that still operated like an exclusive gentleman's club. He genuinely believed that leadership was inherited through bloodlines rather than earned through competence and innovation. The daily microaggressions were relentless and calculated. Marcus would schedule important client meetings during times he knew I had prior commitments, then criticize my absence as lack of dedication to key relationships. He'd reassign projects I'd developed from conception to implementation, giving them to male colleagues who'd present my work as their own while I watched from the sidelines. When Henderson Luxury Brands won the prestigious Chicago Business Innovation Award for our Sustainable Packaging Initiative, Marcus accepted the honor without mentioning that I had spent 8 months researching eco-friendly alternatives and convincing manufacturers to adopt new processes. The gala was Henderson Luxury Brands' annual celebration, where Marcus loved to parade around potential investors and remind everyone of his family legacy. The event cost the company nearly $200,000. Money that could have been invested in research and development or employee advancement programs. Instead, Marcus preferred these ostentatious displays of wealth and status, believing they projected strength when they actually revealed insecurity and misplaced priorities. He'd spent the evening introducing me as one of our hardworking employees, while positioning himself as the visionary behind every successful campaign I developed. When Margaret Thornton, CEO of Thornton Media Group, complimented the innovative digital marketing strategy that had increased our online engagement by 300%, Marcus smoothly claimed credit while I stood silently beside him, holding my champagne and watching him rewrite history in real time. The key to our success, Marcus told the gathered investors, has been my commitment to staying ahead of industry trends while maintaining our brand's traditional values. It's a delicate balance that requires years of experience and deep understanding of luxury market psychology. The October chill seemed to seep through the walls as guests mingled, unaware that they were witnessing the calm before a corporate storm that would reshape everything they thought they knew about Henderson luxury brands. You see, Sarah, Marcus continued, adjusting his platinum cufflinks, running a company requires a certain pedigree, a natural instinct for leadership that, frankly, you just don't possess. Your work is adequate, but vision, strategy, those require breeding. He took a sip of his whiskey, completely oblivious to the fact that I had spent the past month in intensive meetings with the board of directors, preparing for the transition that would happen Monday morning. My grandmother had taught me that true power lies not in making noise, but in moving silently until the moment you strike. Helen Chun had survived the economic crashes of the 80s and 90s by understanding that patience and preparation were more valuable than bravado and birthright. She'd watched companies crumble under entitled leadership while building her own empire through careful observation and strategic timing. Sarah, she had explained during one of our strategy sessions in her Lake Shore Drive penthouse, Americans often mistake loudness for leadership and confidence for competence. In Chinese culture, we have a saying, the wise find pleasure in water, the virtuous find pleasure in hills. Water moves quietly but shapes mountains over time. Be like water. Her investment philosophy reflected this wisdom. While other investors chased quick returns and flashy acquisitions, Helen built wealth through patient accumulation of undervalued assets. The Chen Investment Group had grown from her initial real estate holdings into a diversified portfolio worth over $400 million. She taught me to read financial statements like literature, understanding not just the numbers but the stories they told about management competence, market positioning, and long-term viability. When she first suggested investing in Henderson luxury brands, I'd been skeptical about backing a company where I worked, but Helen saw the opportunity that Marcus's incompetence was creating. The irony was delicious and multifaceted. While Marcus had been busy playing golf at the Medina Country Club and attending charity events to maintain his social status, I had been working 16-hour days, not just managing marketing campaigns, but studying every aspect of Henderson luxury brands' operations. I understood our supply chains better than our operations manager, who had been with the company for 12 years but never bothered to visit our manufacturing partners in North Carolina. I knew our customer demographics more thoroughly than our sales director, who still believed luxury consumers made decisions based solely on prestige rather than values alignment and brand authenticity. During my supposed lunch breaks, I'd been building relationships with key clients that Marcus didn't even realize existed. Rebecca Morrison, owner of Morrison Luxury Boutiques across the Midwest, had become not just a business partner but a trusted advisor who shared insights about retail trends and consumer behavior. James Wu, our largest distributor on the West Coast, regularly called me directly for inventory planning and seasonal forecasting because he'd learned that Marcus rarely understood the operational implications of his grand strategic pronouncements. Most importantly, I had developed connections with emerging designers and sustainable manufacturers who were revolutionizing luxury production. While Marcus clung to traditional suppliers whose methods were becoming increasingly obsolete, I was quietly building partnerships with innovators who could help Henderson luxury brands transition into the next generation of conscious luxury consumption. These relationships would prove invaluable when it came time to implement the expansion plans that my grandmother and I had been developing for months. 3 weeks earlier, during a particularly brutal performance review that Marcus had scheduled for 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, he had actually suggested I consider finding a role more suited to my skill set, perhaps in a smaller company where attention to detail was more valued than big-picture thinking. The meeting had taken place in his corner office, surrounded by portraits of his ancestors who had built the company's reputation through genuine innovation and customer service, values their descendants seemed to have forgotten entirely. Sarah, I've been thinking about your career trajectory, Marcus had said, leaning back in his leather chair with the casual cruelty of someone who had never fought for anything in his life. You're clearly intelligent and hardworking, but there's a difference between being competent at execution and having the vision necessary for strategic leadership. Some people are natural followers, and there's no shame in that. The condescension in his voice had been matched by his body language, fingers steepled as if he were delivering profound wisdom rather than career-limiting prejudice. I think you'd be happier in an environment where your particular talents could be better appreciated. Maybe something in nonprofit marketing, where mission-driven work might better align with your perspective. His pause before the word perspective carried the weight of every stereotype and assumption he'd made about my capabilities based on his own limited worldview. What made the conversation even more insulting was that he delivered this supposed career advice immediately after our quarterly numbers showed that marketing initiatives I developed had directly contributed to a 22% increase in revenue year over year. My sustainable luxury campaign had not only attracted new customers, but had improved customer retention rates among existing clients who were increasingly conscious about environmental impact. Yet Marcus somehow translated this success into evidence that I lacked strategic thinking capability. What Marcus didn't understand was that those Henderson ancestors he was so proud of had been smart enough to take outside investment when the company needed capital to expand. His grandfather, Robert Henderson, had been a brilliant businessman who understood that maintaining family control sometimes required strategic partnerships with outside investors. In 1974, facing increased competition from European luxury brands, Robert had sold 38% of the company to various investors, using the capital to modernize manufacturing and expand distribution networks. Those shares had changed hands multiple times over the decades, traded through private sales, estate settlements, and corporate restructuring deals that Marcus had never bothered to track. My grandmother's fund had been methodically purchasing them through shell companies and third-party acquisitions, building a controlling interest that wouldn't become apparent until the quarterly shareholder meeting. Each transaction had been perfectly legal and professionally executed, documented through law firms that specialized in discrete corporate acquisitions. The process had required extraordinary patience and financial sophistication. Helen's team of financial advisors and attorneys had spent months identifying current shareholders, many of whom were elderly individuals or small investment groups looking to liquidate positions they'd held for decades. Some shares had been acquired through estate sales, others through private negotiations with investors who needed liquidity for other ventures. The largest block, nearly 15%, had come from a pension fund that was restructuring its portfolio to focus on tech investments. Marcus's ignorance of these transactions wasn't entirely surprising given his general disinterest in the financial and legal aspects of running a business. He preferred the glamorous elements of leadership, client entertainment, industry conferences, and media interviews where he could pontificate about luxury market trends without demonstrating any deep understanding of operational reality. The Chicago wind howled outside as Marcus regaled a group of potential investors with stories of his leadership philosophy, completely unaware that several of them had already committed to backing my expansion plans after months of careful relationship building. Among the guests were David Martinez from Martinez Capital, who specialized in sustainable luxury investments, and Patricia Wong from Wong Financial Group, who had been looking for opportunities to support women-led businesses in traditional industries. The key to luxury branding, Marcus pontificated, swirling his crystal tumbler of 25-year-old Macallan, is understanding that exclusivity begins at the top. Customers can sense authentic leadership, and frankly, that's not something you can fake or learn in business school. It's about breeding, about understanding quality at a cellular level. His voice carried the particular arrogance of someone who had never questioned whether his success was earned or inherited. Patricia Wong exchanged a meaningful glance with me from across the room. She'd been one of the first investors to express interest in our expansion plans, particularly our initiative to partner with female designers from underrepresented communities. "Interesting perspective, Marcus," she said diplomatically. "Though I find that some of the most innovative leadership comes from those who've had to fight for their opportunities rather than those who've been handed them." Marcus laughed dismissively, completely missing the subtle challenge in her words. "Of course, Patricia, everyone has their place in the ecosystem. But when it comes to stewarding a brand with Henderson's heritage, you need someone who understands luxury from the inside out. Someone who was raised in this world, who knows instinctively what our customers expect. He gestured expansively toward the portraits of his ancestors that lined the ballroom's walls, apparently unaware that several of those ancestors would have been appalled by his cavalier dismissal of merit-based advancement. I excused myself from his impromptu seminar and stepped onto the terrace, where the October air cut through my navy cocktail dress like a reminder that change was coming. The Palmer House's historic terrace offered a commanding view of Chicago's downtown district, with the Willis Tower and John Hancock Building piercing the cloudy sky like monuments to ambition and determination. Lake Michigan stretched endlessly beyond the city lights, dark and powerful and patient, its waves crashing against North Avenue Beach in a rhythm that reminded me of my grandmother's favorite meditation practice. Standing there in the cold night air, I thought about all the moments that had led to this precipice. The late nights spent analyzing market data while Marcus attended charity galas. The client calls I'd fielded on weekends because Marcus was unavailable and customers needed immediate responses to urgent concerns. The innovative campaigns I'd developed only to watch him present them as his own vision to board members who should have known better. The terrace was nearly empty except for a few other guests seeking refuge from the crowded ballroom. Among them was Robert Chin, my uncle and Helen's youngest son, who had flown in from San Francisco for tomorrow's board meeting. Robert managed the West Coast operations of Chun Investment Group and had been instrumental in securing the final share acquisitions that gave us controlling interest. His presence at the gala was no coincidence. Helen believed in maintaining family unity during major business transitions. "Nervous?" Robert asked, joining me at the railing with his own glass of wine. His question was quiet enough that other guests couldn't overhear, but his eyes sparkled with the anticipation of someone who understood exactly what was about to unfold. "Excited," I replied honestly. 3 years of planning, 18 months of execution, and 6 months of intense preparation all comes down to tomorrow morning. Everything we've worked for, everything Grandma taught us about patience and strategy, it all gets tested in that boardroom. Robert nodded thoughtfully, looking out over the city that had given our family so many opportunities. "She's proud of you, Sarah. Not just because you're about to become CEO, but because you've done it the right way. No shortcuts, no compromises, just careful planning and excellent execution. That's the Chun way." The weekend passed slowly, each hour bringing me closer to the moment when Marcus Henderson would discover that his family legacy was about to take a very different direction. I spent Saturday morning in my Lincoln Park apartment, reviewing the transition documents that my grandmother's legal team had prepared. The paperwork was meticulous and comprehensive, covering everything from executive compensation packages to employee retention strategies and operational continuity plans. Saturday afternoon was devoted to a final strategy session with Helen at her Lake Shore Drive penthouse. The apartment overlooked Lincoln Park Zoo and offered stunning views of Lake Michigan, but our focus was entirely on the detailed restructuring plan we'd been developing for months. Helen had assembled a team of advisors that included former executives from luxury brands, sustainability consultants, and change management specialists who understood how to transform corporate culture without destroying operational effectiveness. "Sarah," Helen said, reviewing financial projections on her tablet while classical music played softly in the background, "the transition will be scrutinized by industry analysts and business media. Every decision we make in the first 90 days will signal our intentions and competence. We must be flawless in execution while remaining gracious in victory." Her apartment was decorated with art from emerging Asian American artists, a reminder that she'd always believed in supporting talent that others overlooked. Sunday morning brought unexpected nerves as the reality of assuming CEO responsibilities settled into my consciousness. I'd been preparing for this moment for years, but the weight of leading a company with over 200 employees and millions in annual revenue felt simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. I spent the day walking along the lakefront, watching joggers and families enjoying the crisp October weather, thinking about the responsibility I was about to accept and the changes I wanted to implement. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, typical for October in Chicago, with Lake Michigan generating the kind of wind that cuts through even the warmest coat. I arrived at the Henderson Luxury Brands headquarters on North Michigan Avenue at exactly 8:30, wearing my most professional charcoal gray suit from Nordstrom and carrying a leather briefcase containing legal documents that would reshape the company's future. The 40-story building rose into the cloudy sky like a monument to Chicago's business ambitions, its glass facade reflecting the morning light in patterns that shifted with the moving clouds. The lobby was already bustling with Monday morning energy, security guards greeting familiar faces, delivery personnel bringing fresh flowers for the reception areas, and early arriving employees grabbing coffee from the building's Starbucks before heading to their floors. The marble floors echoed with the sound of heels and dress shoes, creating a symphony of professional purpose that I'd grown to love during my 3 years with the company. Henderson Luxury Brands occupied the 32nd through 35th floors, with executive offices and the boardroom claiming the premium real estate on 35. As I rode the elevator up, I reflected on how different this building would feel by the end of the day. The same marble walls and brass fixtures would remain, but the power dynamics that governed every interaction within those walls were about to shift dramatically. The reception area buzzed with normal Monday energy, assistants organizing schedules and confirming appointments, executives grabbing coffee before their first meetings, everyone blissfully unaware that they were about to witness corporate history. Jennifer Martinez, Marcus's assistant, looked particularly stressed as she juggled phone calls and tried to accommodate last-minute scheduling changes that the emergency board meeting had created. "Good morning, Sarah," called Michelle Thompson from Human Resources, who was walking past with an armload of employee files. "Ready for another exciting week?" Her cheerful greeting carried no hint of the transformation that would begin in less than 2 hours, when the company's entire leadership structure would be redefined by legal documents and financial reality. Marcus strutted into the building at 9:15, 15 minutes late as usual, his confidence radiating the special arrogance of someone who believed the world existed for his convenience. He wore a navy Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than most employees' monthly salary, and his Italian leather shoes clicked authoritatively against the marble floor as he made his way toward the executive elevator. His entrance commanded attention not through respect but through the kind of inherited privilege that demanded deference without earning it. He nodded dismissively at me as he passed my desk, probably assuming I was preparing another marketing report for his approval or organizing materials for client presentations he'd ultimately take credit for. His expression carried the casual indifference of someone who had never questioned his position in the corporate hierarchy, who assumed that his comfort and authority were natural laws rather than temporary circumstances maintained by others' hard work. "Morning, Sarah," he said without slowing down, already focused on checking his phone for messages from the golf course or social invitations that would fill his afternoon schedule. "I need those Morrison account projections on my desk by 10:30. Try to include some actual strategic thinking this time instead of just numbers and graphs." Jennifer, his assistant, looked nervous as she reminded him about the 10 o'clock board meeting that had been scheduled at the last minute. Her normally composed demeanor showed cracks of anxiety as she realized she couldn't provide him with the agenda details he was demanding. The meeting had been arranged directly through Helen's administrative team, bypassing normal corporate protocols that would have given Marcus advance warning about its purpose and scope. "What's this emergency meeting about?" Marcus asked, clearly annoyed that his Monday routine had been disrupted by matters he couldn't control. "I have a golf appointment at noon with the Morrison account executives, and I don't appreciate having my schedule changed without consultation. You know how important that relationship is to our Q4 numbers." His voice carried the petulant tone of someone accustomed to organizing corporate life around his personal preferences rather than business necessities. "What's this emergency meeting about?" Marcus asked, clearly annoyed that his Monday routine had been disrupted. "I have a golf appointment at noon with the Morrison account, and I don't appreciate having my schedule changed without consultation." Jennifer glanced at me uncertainly before explaining that the board had requested an urgent session to address ownership transition matters and leadership restructuring. The words hung in the air like a storm warning, each syllable carrying implications that Marcus's brain struggled to process. The color drained from his face as the possibilities began to sink in, though he still didn't understand the full scope of what was about to happen. "Ownership transition?" Marcus repeated, his voice rising slightly with the first hint of genuine concern I'd seen from him in months. "What does that mean exactly? Are we talking about some kind of merger discussion? Because I should have been informed immediately if another company was making acquisition inquiries." His hands moved restlessly, adjusting his tie and checking his phone, as if external validation could provide clarity about internal corporate developments. The minutes crawled by as Marcus paced his office, making phone calls to legal advisors and business contacts who might have insights about mysterious board meetings and ownership changes. Each conversation seemed to increase his agitation rather than provide reassurance, as his usual network of privileged information proved useless in the face of transactions that had been conducted with professional discretion and legal precision. At 9:45, I gathered my materials and made my way to the 35th floor, where the executive boardroom commanded panoramic views of Chicago's skyline. The elevator ride felt both eternal and instantaneous, carrying me toward a moment that would define not just my career but my entire understanding of what was possible when careful planning met strategic opportunity. The hallway was quieter than usual, with most administrative staff busy with their normal Monday routines, unaware that the company's future was about to be redefined in the room at the end of the corridor. The boardroom on the 20th floor offered a panoramic view of Chicago's downtown, the Lake Michigan shoreline stretching to the horizon under heavy October clouds that promised afternoon rain. The conference table was surrounded by 12 directors, most of whom Marcus recognized but several he'd never seen before. The familiar faces included long-term Henderson board members like Thomas Wilson and Margaret Patterson, who had served during his father's tenure and understood the company's history. The unfamiliar faces belonged to representatives from Chun Investment Group and its affiliated advisory firms. My grandmother sat at the head of the table, her silver hair perfectly styled in the elegant chignon she'd worn to every important business meeting for the past 30 years. She wore a charcoal business suit from her preferred Chicago tailor, a choice that commanded respect without ostentation. Her presence dominated the room not through volume or aggressive posturing, but through the quiet authority of someone who had built empires while others inherited positions. Helen's hands rested calmly on the leather portfolio that contained 3 years' worth of acquisition documentation, legal analyses, and strategic planning materials. Her expression was serene but alert, like a chess master who had been planning this combination for dozens of moves and was finally ready to announce checkmate. The other Chun Investment Group representatives flanked her with similar composure, each carrying folders that contained specific aspects of the transition plan. "Good morning, Marcus," Helen said as he entered the room, her voice carrying the measured tone of someone who understood the weight of the moment. "Please take a seat. We have quite a bit to discuss this morning, and I believe you'll find our conversation both illuminating and transformative for Henderson Luxury Brand's future." Marcus looked around the table with growing comprehension that this was not a routine board meeting or casual consultation. The formal arrangement of documents, the presence of unfamiliar legal advisors, and the serious expressions of board members he'd known for years all signaled that something fundamental was about to change. His usual confidence began to evaporate as he realized he was walking into a situation he didn't understand and couldn't control. "Marcus Henderson," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had built empires while others inherited them, "I'd like you to meet the other members of Chun Investment Group's board of directors. We now own 51% of Henderson Luxury Brands, and we're here to discuss the company's new direction." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus looked around the table, his brain struggling to process information that contradicted everything he believed about corporate hierarchy and family legacy. His eyes finally landed on me, standing near the window in my navy suit, holding a folder containing his severance package and a comprehensive restructuring plan. "This is impossible," he stammered, his usual confidence evaporating like morning mist over the lake. "Henderson Luxury Brands has been family-owned for 3 generations. My father built this company. My grandfather established its reputation. You can't just walk in here and steal what doesn't belong to you." My grandmother's laugh was soft but cutting. "Marcus, nothing was stolen. Every share we purchased was acquired legally through open market transactions. Your family chose to sell equity to raise capital, and those shares eventually found their way to investors who understood their true value. We've been excellent stewards of our investment, watching Sarah transform your marketing department while you took credit for her innovations. The October wind rattled the boardroom windows as the full weight of the situation crashed down on Marcus Henderson. His family legacy hadn't been stolen. It had been sold piece by piece over decades, and he'd been too entitled and complacent to pay attention to who was buying. The company would continue bearing the Henderson name, but under leadership that understood the difference between inherited position and earned authority. Sarah will be assuming the role of Chief Executive Officer effective immediately, my grandmother continued, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. Her vision for Henderson Luxury Brands includes expanding into sustainable luxury goods, developing partnerships with emerging designers, and creating an inclusive corporate culture that values merit over pedigree. The board has complete confidence in her ability to lead this company into its next chapter. Marcus turned to stare at me, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally, a grudging recognition that he'd completely underestimated the hard-working employee he'd dismissed so casually. "You've been planning this for months," he said, his voice hollow with the realization that every conversation, every performance review, every condescending comment had been witnessed by someone who held his professional future in her hands. 3 years, actually," I replied, setting my folder on the conference table. "My grandmother taught me that the best revenge is success, and the most complete victory comes from patience and preparation. You spent so much time telling me I wasn't executive material that you never bothered to notice I was already executing at an executive level." The transition was swift and professional, executed with the kind of precision that reflected months of careful planning and legal preparation. Marcus was offered a generous severance package that included 18 months of salary continuation, full healthcare benefits, and positive references that would help him secure another executive position. The package also included non-disclosure agreements and non-compete clauses that protected Henderson Luxury Brands' interests while allowing Marcus to rebuild his career without unnecessary complications. "We want this transition to be successful for everyone involved," Helen explained as she presented the severance documents. "Marcus, you've been part of Henderson Luxury Brands for 5 years, and we recognize your contributions during that time. This package reflects our commitment to treating all employees with respect and fairness, regardless of the circumstances that lead to leadership changes." Marcus's departure from Henderson Luxury Brands was framed as a mutual decision to pursue new opportunities that better aligned with his personal career goals. The business press covered the story with fascination, portraying it as a modern tale of merit defeating entitlement, though they missed the deeper narrative of strategic patience and generational wisdom that had made the acquisition possible. The Chicago Tribune's business section ran a front-page story titled, "From Marketing Manager to CEO, The Sarah Chan Success Story," while Crane's Chicago Business featured a longer analysis of how immigrant families were reshaping traditional corporate hierarchies through strategic investment and professional excellence. Forbes published an online article about Helen Chen's investment philosophy and her belief in supporting second-generation professionals who understood both American business culture and international perspectives. The industry reaction was overwhelmingly positive, with competitors and suppliers expressing enthusiasm about working with leadership that understood operational excellence rather than just inherited privilege. Several major retail partners privately admitted they'd been frustrated with Marcus's approach to customer service and had been hoping for exactly the kind of change that Sarah's promotion represented. Within 6 months, Henderson Luxury Brands had launched its sustainable luxury line, partnered with 3 emerging designers from underrepresented communities, and increased profitability by 28%. The company's culture shifted from hierarchical intimidation to collaborative innovation, attracting talent that had previously avoided working for an organization known for its elitist atmosphere. The real satisfaction wasn't in Marcus Henderson's downfall, but in proving that leadership isn't inherited or granted by birthright. It's earned through competence, dedication, and the wisdom to recognize that true power comes from lifting others up rather than keeping them down. My grandmother's investment hadn't just been financial. It was a bet on the idea that merit would ultimately triumph over entitlement. The Chicago business community learned a valuable lesson that October. Never underestimate the quiet ones who show up early, work late, and pay attention to details that others consider beneath their notice. Sometimes the person fetching coffee is actually the person planning to own the company, And the employee you dismiss as not executive material is the executive who's been waiting for the right moment to prove you wrong. Marcus Henderson eventually found another position at a smaller firm, where hopefully he learned to appreciate talent regardless of its packaging. As for me, I kept my grandmother's portrait in the CEO office as a reminder that the most powerful moves in business, like in life, are often made by those who understand that patience isn't passive waiting, but active preparation for the moment when opportunity meets readiness. The October wind still rattles the windows of Henderson Luxury Brand's headquarters, but now it sounds like applause for the quiet revolution that proved executive material isn't something you're born with, but something you become through dedication, vision, and the courage to seize the moment when it finally arrives.